There are moments in life when a person discovers that everything he believed was enough suddenly no longer feels sufficient. My name is Julius Malema, and for many years I believed that determination, political strategy, discipline, and relentless effort could overcome almost any obstacle standing before a nation. I believe that if leaders worked hard enough, spoke loudly enough, and fought fiercely enough, solutions would eventually emerge. But there came a time when I found myself facing a reality that shook that confidence. South Africa was carrying heavy burdens. Everywhere I looked, I saw signs of struggle. Families were trying to survive with limited options. Young people were graduating from schools and universities only to face uncertainty. Communities were growing frustrated after years of hearing promises that never seemed to become reality. The distance between those who had much and those who had very little appeared to grow wider with each passing year. As a political leader, people expected answers from me. They expected strength. They expected direction. They expected solutions. Every meeting brought new problems. Every debate revealed deeper divisions. Every conversation seemed to remind me how much pain many ordinary people were carrying. I worked harder than ever. I attended more meetings. I studied more reports. I listened to more advisors. Yet, despite all of that effort, a troubling realization slowly began to grow inside me. Political power has limits. No matter how passionate a leader may be, no matter how determined a movement may become, there are wounds within a society that cannot be healed by speeches alone. There are problems that cannot be solved by authority alone. There are burdens that cannot be carried by human strength alone. At first, I resisted that thought. Like many leaders, I wanted to believe that if I simply worked harder, pushed further, and fought longer, everything would eventually improve. But deep inside, exhaustion was beginning to replace certainty. The truth was simple. I had reached a point where my own strength was no longer enough. And it was during that season of pressure, frustration, and unanswered questions that something happened which changed the way I understood leadership, responsibility, faith, and even myself. What occurred was not part of any political strategy. It was not something discussed in a meeting. It was not something planned by advisors. It happened during one quiet night when the noise of politics finally disappeared and I found myself alone with thoughts I could no longer ignore. What I experienced that night would leave a lesson that I carry with me to this day. And it all began when I finally stopped running. For many people, leadership appears powerful from a distance. People see public speeches, television interviews, political gatherings, and important meetings. They see confidence. They see determination. They see someone standing in front of large crowds speaking about the future of a nation. What they do not always see is the weight that follows a leader home at the end of the day. During that period of my life, the pressure seemed endless. Every morning began with urgent matters demanding immediate attention. Reports arrived describing economic hardship in different communities. Advisors presented concerns about unemployment. Activists demanded faster change. Critics questioned every decision. Supporters expected results. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted solutions. Everyone wanted hope. I understood their expectations because I shared many of their concerns. As I traveled through different parts of South Africa, I listened to stories that stayed with me long after the conversations ended. I met fathers who wanted nothing more than stable work so they could provide for their families. I met mothers who worried constantly about their children's future. I met young men and women filled with talent and ambition, but unable to find opportunities that matched their abilities. Many of them had done everything society asked them to do. They had studied. They had worked hard. They had remained patient. Yet they still found themselves waiting. The disappointment in their voices was difficult to ignore. At the same time, the gap between wealth and poverty seemed impossible to overlook. Some people enjoyed enormous privilege, while others struggled to meet basic needs. Entire communities felt forgotten. Trust in institutions was weakening. Trust in leadership was weakening. Trust in promises was weakening. As these realities became more visible, the demands placed upon leaders became greater. People looked toward political figures and expected immediate change. They wanted someone capable of fixing problems that had developed over many years. Often I felt that expectation personally. I wanted to help. I wanted to provide answers. I wanted to fight for justice and opportunity. But there were moments when I sat quietly and asked myself a difficult question. What happens when the problems facing a nation are larger than any single individual? The more I reflected on that question, the more uncomfortable the answer became. No leader can solve everything. No movement can solve everything. No political office possesses unlimited power. For years, I had focused on strategy, organization, and political action. Those things remain important. But I was beginning to understand that human beings sometimes place too much faith in power and too little faith in wisdom. There comes a point when working harder is no longer enough. There comes a point when shouting louder is no longer enough. There comes a point when a leader must admit that he does not carry every answer. Reaching that realization was not easy. In many ways, it felt like failure. Yet looking back now, I understand that it was actually the beginning of something important. Before a person can learn deeper truths, he must first recognize the limits of his own strength. That lesson was waiting for me. I simply did not know it yet. What happened next began during a night unlike any other, when the noise of public life finally faded and I found myself alone with thoughts that could no longer be ignored. After many days of intense pressure, I finally found myself alone. There were no cameras. There were no journalists asking questions. There were no political discussions demanding immediate attention. For the first time in what felt like a very long time, there was only silence. I remember sitting quietly that evening, feeling a level of exhaustion that was deeper than physical fatigue. My body was tired, but it was my spirit that felt truly worn down. The responsibilities of leadership had become heavy. Every problem seemed connected to another problem. Every solution appeared to create new challenges. The more I thought about the future of South Africa, the more questions filled my mind. I thought about the families struggling to pay for basic necessities. I thought about workers who rose before sunrise each day, yet still found it difficult to provide for their loved ones. I thought about elderly citizens who had sacrificed much throughout their lives and now worried about their future security. I thought about young people standing at the edge of adulthood with dreams in their hearts but uncertainty before them. Many of them were losing hope. That reality troubled me deeply. A nation can survive many difficulties, but when its young people begin to lose hope, something precious is at risk. I also thought about communities that felt abandoned. Some people believed that leaders no longer understood their daily struggles. Others believed that promises had become more common than action. Whether those perceptions were always fair or not, they were real to the people experiencing them, and real pain deserves to be acknowledged. As the night grew quieter, I found myself asking questions that had no easy answers. How do you restore trust once it has been broken? How do you create opportunity where opportunity has disappeared? How do you heal divisions that have existed for generations? Most importantly, how do you continue leading when you are no longer certain that your own strength is enough? Those questions remained with me as the evening passed. For once, I did not try to force an answer. I did not search through reports. I did not call advisors. I did not prepare another strategy. I simply sat with those thoughts. In that silence, something unexpected happened. The noise inside my mind slowly began to settle, not because the problems had disappeared, not because the challenges had become smaller, but because I finally stopped trying to carry everything alone. There is a difference between responsibility and control. A leader may carry responsibility, but no human being controls every outcome. That truth may sound simple, yet many leaders spend years learning it. I certainly did. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me. The weight of countless concerns, decisions, expectations, and responsibilities had drained every remaining ounce of energy. I leaned back and closed my eyes. My final thoughts before sleep were not about politics. They were not about elections. They were not about public opinion. They were about people, ordinary people. The people whose lives are affected by every decision made by those in positions of authority. The people whose struggles rarely appear in headlines. The people who continue fighting through difficult circumstances every day. With those thoughts still in my heart, I fell asleep. I believed the night would end like any other. I expected nothing unusual. I expected only rest. Instead, what happened next would become one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. That night, I had a dream unlike any dream I had ever experienced before. As I slept that night, I entered a dream that felt different from any dream I had ever known. It did not begin with dramatic events. There were no great crowds. There were no government buildings. There were no political rallies or debates. Instead, I found myself standing in a simple place among ordinary people. The atmosphere was calm. Everything felt peaceful. Yet beneath that peace was a sense of importance that is difficult to describe with words. As I looked around, I saw people from many walks of life. Some appeared burdened by hardship. Others carried the quiet sadness of disappointment. Some looked tired from years of struggle. Others seemed to be searching for answers. What struck me most was that none of them were being ignored. Someone was walking among them. Someone was listening. Someone was paying attention to every person. Then I recognized him. It was Jesus. He did not appear as a ruler sitting on a throne. He did not appear surrounded by displays of earthly power. He walked among ordinary people. He stopped to listen. He looked into their faces. He seemed to understand their pain without anyone needing to explain it. The peace surrounding him was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was not weakness. It was not passivity. It was strength without arrogance, authority without intimidation, power without pride. As I watched him move among the people, I felt something inside me change. For years, I had associated leadership with action, strategy, and constant movement. Yet here was a different picture of leadership. Jesus was not rushing. He was not competing. He was not trying to prove anything. And yet everyone around him seemed drawn to his presence. There was a dignity in the way he treated each person. No one appeared invisible. No one appeared forgotten. No one appeared beneath his attention. As I stood there observing, Jesus eventually turned toward me. The moment his eyes met mine, I felt exposed in the most honest way possible. Not condemned, not humiliated, simply understood. It was as though every burden I had been carrying was already known. Every fear, every frustration, every unanswered question, every doubt. He looked at me the way a teacher might look at a student who has struggled for a long time and is finally ready to learn an important lesson. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he came closer. His voice was calm. There was no anger in it. There was no accusation, only certainty. He said words that I have never forgotten. Tomorrow is the holy day of rest. Stop striving and let me carry what you cannot carry. The simplicity of those words surprised me. I expected instructions. I expected solutions. I expected a plan. Instead, I received an invitation to stop, an invitation to trust, an invitation to release burdens that had become too heavy for human strength alone. In the dream, I wanted to respond. I wanted to explain everything. I wanted to tell him about the challenges facing our nation. I wanted to tell him about unemployment, poverty, division, and broken trust. But before I could speak, I understood something. He already knew. He knew every problem. He knew every struggle. He knew every burden I had been trying to carry. And still his message remained the same. Stop, rest, trust. Allow me to carry what you cannot. The dream did not last much longer after that. Yet the impact of those words remained. Even within the dream itself, I sensed that what I was hearing was not only about one day of rest, it was about something deeper. It was about recognizing that human beings were never meant to carry the weight of the entire world upon their shoulders. It was about understanding that true strength begins where pride ends. And it was about learning that sometimes the most courageous thing a leader can do is surrender the illusion of control. When I finally opened my eyes the next morning, the dream remained vivid in my memory. Every detail felt unusually clear. The words still echoed in my mind. I knew immediately that this had not felt like an ordinary dream. And as I sat quietly reflecting on what I had seen, I began to understand that Jesus had not given me a political strategy. He had given me lessons about character, lessons that would challenge the way I thought about leadership, power, and responsibility forever. When I awoke the next morning, the dream remained fresh in my mind. Many dreams disappear within minutes after waking. This one did not. The image of Jesus walking among ordinary people remained clear. His words remained clear. The peace I felt in his presence remained clear. As I reflected on the experience, I began to understand that his message contained lessons far greater than I first realized. They were not lessons about elections. They were not lessons about political victories. They were lessons about character. And the more I thought about them, the more I recognized how desperately leaders need them. The first lesson was integrity. Throughout history, moments of crisis have often created opportunities for individuals to gain influence, authority, and power. Fear can be a powerful tool. Desperation can be a powerful tool. Uncertainty can be a powerful tool. Yet I felt strongly that Jesus was reminding me of something important. A leader should never use the suffering of people for personal advancement. A leader should never manipulate fear for political benefit. A leader should never place ambition above truth. Integrity is not tested when everything is easy. Integrity is tested when temptation appears. It is tested when shortcuts become available. It is tested when power can be gained by compromising principles. That lesson challenged me deeply. The second lesson was love, not the kind of love often discussed in slogans or speeches, a practical love, a compassionate love, a love that sees people before politics. Too often, public debates become focused on winning arguments rather than helping human beings. Policies are important. Strategies are important. Governments are important. But if people are forgotten in the process, something essential has been lost. Jesus walked among ordinary people because people mattered. Not statistics, not headlines. People. I began to realize that every policy should ultimately be measured by its impact on human dignity. Without compassion, even good intentions can produce harm. The third lesson was courage. Many people think courage means speaking loudly. Sometimes it does. But courage also means refusing to remain silent when silence becomes convenient. There are moments when leaders are tempted to avoid difficult truths. There are moments when speaking honestly carries risks. There are moments when confronting injustice creates opposition. Yet silence can become its own form of harm. I felt that Jesus was teaching me that leaders must be willing to speak when conscience demands it, not recklessly, not arrogantly, but faithfully. Truth should never be sacrificed simply because it is uncomfortable. The fourth lesson was humility. This lesson may have been the most difficult of all. Human beings often want to believe that enough power can solve every problem. Leaders are especially vulnerable to that belief. People praise them. People follow them. People expect answers from them. Eventually, some leaders begin believing they alone can rescue a nation. But Jesus showed me something different. No individual saves a country through power alone. No government creates peace through authority alone. No movement succeeds through pride alone. Real change requires respect. Real change requires dignity. Real change requires recognizing the value of every human life. Humility is not weakness. Humility is understanding one's proper place. It is recognizing that leadership is a responsibility, not a crown. It is remembering that every leader remains human. The more I reflected on those 4 lessons, the more I understood why the dream had affected me so deeply. Integrity over power, love over ambition, courage over silence, humility over pride. Those principles sounded simple, yet I realized they had the power to transform not only leaders, but entire societies. The challenges facing South Africa remained. The difficulties had not disappeared overnight. The economic struggles were still real. The divisions were still real. The frustrations were still real. But something inside me had changed. For the first time in a long while, I felt less concerned about controlling every outcome and more concerned about becoming the kind of leader capable of serving with honesty, compassion, courage, and humility. The dream had given me no detailed roadmap, yet it had given me something more valuable. It had given me a foundation, and that foundation would soon lead me to make a decision that surprised even me. I chose to do something I had not done in a very long time. I chose to stop. When I opened my eyes that morning, I knew something was different. The problems facing our nation had not disappeared. The challenges that had occupied my thoughts for months were still waiting for me. The phone would still ring. The meetings would still take place. The debates would still continue. Yet despite all of that, there was an unusual clarity within me. The dream felt too meaningful to ignore. I could not simply dismiss it as a product of exhaustion. The words of Jesus remained alive in my mind. Tomorrow is the holy day of rest. Stop striving and let me carry what you cannot carry. For years, my instinct had always been the same. Move faster. Work harder. Respond immediately. Push through fatigue. Keep fighting. In politics, stopping is often viewed as weakness. Rest is sometimes viewed as laziness. Reflection is sometimes viewed as wasted time. The culture of leadership often rewards constant activity. People admire motion. People admire busyness. People admire leaders who appear tireless. I spent much of my life operating that way. But that morning, I made a decision that felt unusual. I chose to obey what I believed I had been shown. Instead of rushing into another cycle of endless activity, I stopped. Not permanently, not irresponsibly, but intentionally. I stepped away from the constant pressure that normally consumed every hour of my attention. I gave myself time to pray. I gave myself time to think. I gave myself time to listen. At first, it felt uncomfortable. My mind kept returning to unfinished tasks. I thought about pending decisions. I thought about public expectations. I thought about everything that still needed to be done. Part of me wanted to return immediately to work. Part of me feared that stopping even briefly would cause me to fall behind. Yet as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. The noise inside my mind began to quiet. For a long time, I had confused activity with effectiveness. I believed that constant motion meant progress. But I was beginning to see that endless reaction often prevents clear thinking. A leader who never pauses can easily lose perspective. A leader who never listens can easily lose wisdom. A leader who never reflects can easily lose direction. As I spent time in prayer and quiet reflection, I began noticing things I had overlooked. I noticed how much fear had been influencing my thinking. Fear of failure, fear of disappointing people, fear of not doing enough, fear of being unable to solve problems beyond my control. Those fears had quietly accumulated over time. I had carried them without realizing how heavy they had become. The dream had revealed something important. Not every burden belongs on my shoulders. Some responsibilities belong to leaders. Some responsibilities belong to governments. Some responsibilities belong to communities. And some burdens must ultimately be entrusted to God. That realization brought a peace I had not felt in many years. It did not remove responsibility. It simply removed the illusion that I alone was responsible for everything. For the first time in a very long while, I stopped reacting and started listening. I listened to my conscience. I listened to the concerns of ordinary people with greater attention. I listened to truths that had been drowned out by the noise of public life. Most importantly, I listened to the quiet voice reminding me that leadership is not about carrying every burden personally. Leadership is about serving faithfully while recognizing human limitations. As that day continued, I felt lighter, not because the challenges had become smaller, not because solutions had suddenly appeared, but because I was no longer trying to control what could not be controlled. There is a freedom that comes when a person accepts that he is not the center of the world. There is a peace that comes when pride gives way to humility. And there is wisdom that emerges when listening becomes more important than speaking. Looking back now, I can say honestly that choosing to obey was one of the most important decisions I ever made. The dream had called me to stop. The Sabbath had called me to rest. And in that rest, I discovered something I had been searching for through years of effort. I discovered peace. Yet peace alone was not enough. As I reflected further, I began thinking about the deeper challenges facing our people. The more I listened, the more clearly I saw that three major problems continue to affect countless lives across our nation. These problems could not be ignored, and understanding them would become essential to understanding what true leadership requires. After that day of rest and reflection, I found myself looking at the challenges facing our nation with different eyes. The problems were not new. I had spoken about many of them before. I had debated them in public forums. I had discussed them with community leaders, workers, students, and families. But now I was seeing them less as political issues and more as human realities. Behind every statistic is a person. Behind every economic report is a family. Behind every national challenge are millions of individual stories. As I listened more carefully, three problems stood out above many others. The first was economic inequality. Across South Africa, countless people continue to work hard every day while struggling to improve their circumstances. Many families live with constant financial pressure. They budget carefully. They make sacrifices. They postpone dreams. Yet, despite their efforts, meaningful progress often feels out of reach. At the same time, enormous wealth remains concentrated among a relatively small portion of society. This reality creates frustration. It creates resentment. It creates a feeling that the system benefits some people far more than others. When ordinary workers begin to feel invisible, trust begins to weaken. When opportunity appears reserved for only a few, hope begins to weaken. Economic inequality is not merely a financial issue. It is a dignity issue. Every person deserves the opportunity to build a better future through honest effort. The second problem was unemployment. This concern weighed heavily on my heart. Throughout my journey as a leader, I have met many young people who possess intelligence, determination, and creativity. They are eager to contribute. They want to work. They want to build families. They want to participate in the growth of their nation, yet many struggle to find opportunities. Some complete their education only to face closed doors. Others possess valuable skills but cannot find employment that allows them to use those abilities. Over time, repeated disappointment can become dangerous. When hope disappears, frustration often takes its place. A nation cannot afford to lose the confidence of its young people. The future belongs to them. If they stop believing that tomorrow can be better than today, the consequences reach far beyond economics. The third problem was the loss of trust. Perhaps this challenge is less visible than poverty or unemployment, but it may be just as serious. Many citizens have had promises for years. Some promises were sincere, some were not. Some were fulfilled, many were not. The result is that people increasingly question those who hold positions of authority. They question institutions. They question leaders. They question whether anyone truly understands their struggles. Trust is difficult to build. It can take years. Yet it can disappear very quickly. Once lost, rebuilding it requires honesty, transparency, and consistent action. No speech alone can restore trust. No campaign alone can restore trust. Only truth can restore trust. As I reflected on these three problems, I understood something important. Economic inequality cannot be solved through slogans. Unemployment cannot be solved through wishful thinking. Loss of trust cannot be solved through public relations. Real solutions require courage. They require honesty. They require leaders who are willing to listen before speaking and serve before demanding recognition. The dream I had experienced was beginning to make even more sense. Jesus had not shown me a shortcut around these problems. He had not promised instant transformation. Instead, he had pointed me toward the character required to face them. Integrity when dealing with power. Love when dealing with people. Courage when confronting difficult truths. Humility when approaching enormous challenges. Those qualities do not eliminate problems overnight. But without them, lasting solutions become nearly impossible. The more I reflected on this, the more I realized that many people misunderstand leadership. They believe leadership means controlling events. They believe leadership means always having answers. They believe leadership means appearing strong at all times. I once believed some of those things myself, but I was beginning to learn something very different. True leadership is not about control. True leadership is about service. And that realization would change the way I understood my responsibilities forever. As I continued reflecting on everything that had happened, I found myself reconsidering many assumptions I had carried for years. Leadership is a word people use often. It appears in political speeches. It appears in business discussions. It appears in conversations about nations, organizations, and communities. Yet, despite how frequently the word is used, many people misunderstand what leadership truly means. For a long time, I believed leadership was primarily about directing events. I believed it was about creating plans, organizing people, and pushing forward towards specific goals. Those responsibilities certainly matter. A leader must make decisions. A leader must provide direction. A leader must accept responsibility. But I eventually realized that leadership is not fundamentally about control. No leader controls everything. No leader determines every outcome. No leader possesses complete knowledge. The dream I experienced forced me to confront that reality. When Jesus walked among ordinary people in that dream, he demonstrated something powerful. He listened. He cared. He paid attention. He served. That image remained with me because it challenged many modern ideas about authority. Too often, leadership becomes associated with status. People focus on titles. They focus on influence. They focus on public recognition. But true leadership begins with service. A leader serves people. A leader listens to people. A leader carries responsibility for people. Without service, leadership becomes self-interest. Without listening, leadership becomes arrogance. Without responsibility, leadership becomes empty performance. As I thought about South Africa and its future, I became increasingly convinced that our nation does not simply need stronger institutions or better policies. We also need leaders willing to serve with humility. Humility is often misunderstood. Some people believe humility means weakness. Others believe humility means lacking confidence. Neither is true. Humility is the ability to recognize reality accurately. It means understanding both your strengths and your limitations. It means accepting responsibility without believing you are greater than others. It means remembering that leadership is temporary while human dignity is permanent. No political office lasts forever. No position of influence lasts forever. No public reputation lasts forever. Eventually, every leader leaves his position behind. The question is not how much power a leader accumulated. The question is how faithfully that leader served the people entrusted to his care. This realization changed the way I viewed my own role. I stopped thinking of leadership as being the person with all the answers. Instead, I began viewing leadership as stewardship. A steward does not own what has been entrusted to him. He manages it responsibly. He protects it. He serves it. In the same way, leaders are temporary guardians of responsibilities much larger than themselves. We do not own our nations. We do not own our communities. We do not own the people we serve. We are entrusted with a responsibility to help them flourish. That understanding brings both freedom and accountability. Freedom, because it removes the impossible burden of trying to control everything. Accountability, because it reminds leaders that they exist to serve, not to be served. The more I embraced this perspective, the more peace I experienced. I no longer felt compelled to appear perfect. I no longer felt compelled to pretend I possessed every solution. I became more willing to listen, more willing to learn, more willing to admit when challenges required collective wisdom rather than individual authority. That shift may sound small. In reality, it changed everything. Because once a leader stops trying to be a savior, he becomes far more capable of being a servant. And in my view, service is the highest form of leadership. As these lessons settled deeper into my heart, I found myself thinking more about the people of South Africa. I thought about their frustrations. I thought about their sacrifices. I thought about their hopes for the future. And I knew there was something I wanted to say to them. Not as a politician delivering a speech, not as a public figure defending a position, but as a fellow human being who had learned an important lesson about responsibility, humility, and hope. As I reflected on everything I had learned, my thoughts repeatedly returned to the people of South Africa. I thought about the countless conversations I have had over the years. I thought about the faces I had seen in towns, cities, villages, and communities across our nation. I thought about the hopes people carry and the disappointments many have endured. And if there is one thing I want the people of South Africa to know, it is this. I understand your frustration. I understand why some people feel forgotten. I understand why some have become skeptical of promises. I understand why many wake up each day carrying concerns about work, food, education, safety, and the future of their families. These concerns are real. They are not statistics. They are not political talking points. They are part of daily life for millions of ordinary people. I have met workers who labor tirelessly yet still struggle to make ends meet. I have met parents who worry constantly about opportunities for their children. I have met young people who wonder whether their dreams can still become reality. I have listened to citizens who feel disconnected from those in positions of authority. Their voices matter, their concerns matter, their dignity matters. No nation can move forward while ignoring the experiences of its people. At the same time, I believe we must be careful about the path we choose. Frustration is understandable. Anger is understandable. Disappointment is understandable. But hatred cannot build a future. Division cannot build a future. Bitterness cannot build a future. A nation cannot heal by turning its people against one another. We must build upon something stronger. We must build upon truth. We must build upon justice. We must build upon responsibility. Truth requires honesty, even when honesty is uncomfortable. Justice requires fairness, even when fairness demands sacrifice. Responsibility requires action, even when action is difficult. These principles are not always easy to follow, yet without them, meaningful progress becomes impossible. I especially want to speak to young people. You are living in a time of uncertainty. Many of you feel discouraged by economic conditions. Many of you question whether hard work will be rewarded. Many of you wonder whether your future will be better than the present. Please do not surrender your hope. Hope is not naive. Hope is necessary. Every generation faces challenges that appear overwhelming. Yet history repeatedly shows that determined people can transform societies. Your talents matter. Your ideas matter. Your contributions matter. South Africa needs your energy, creativity, and courage. I also want to speak to workers, to those who rise early each morning, to those who support families, to those who continue striving despite hardship. You must never believe that your efforts are unseen. The strength of a nation is built upon the labor, sacrifice, and resilience of ordinary people. No society can flourish while neglecting those who sustain it. Every citizen deserves respect. Every citizen deserves dignity. Every citizen deserves the opportunity to participate in building a better future. That future will not arrive through wishful thinking. It will require effort. It will require accountability. It will require leaders and citizens working together toward common goals. But despite all our challenges, I remain hopeful. Not because every problem has been solved, not because every obstacle has disappeared, but because I still believe in the potential of our people. I still believe that truth can overcome deception. I still believe that justice can overcome exploitation. I still believe that unity can overcome division. And I still believe that nations can change when enough people commit themselves to what is right. The lessons I learned from that extraordinary dream continue to guide me. They remind me that leadership begins with character. They remind me that power without integrity becomes dangerous. They remind me that compassion must accompany conviction. And they remind me that humility is often the beginning of wisdom. These lessons are not only for leaders, they are lessons for all of us. And they lead directly to the final truth I wish to share with South Africa, with Africa, and with the wider world. As I look back on that season of my life, I realize that the most important lesson I learned was not political. It was not about elections. It was not about strategy. It was not about gaining influence or winning debates. The most important lesson was learning how to stop. That may sound simple, yet for many leaders, it is one of the most difficult lessons imaginable. We live in a world that constantly rewards movement. People are praised for doing more, speaking more, traveling more, and working more. There is always another meeting. There is always another crisis. There is always another demand for attention. Eventually, many leaders begin believing that their value comes entirely from constant activity. I once believed that myself, but the dream changed my perspective. Jesus did not give me a political plan. He did not hand me a detailed strategy for solving every national problem. Instead, he revealed something far more important. He showed me the kind of character required to face those problems. When human beings convince themselves that they control everything, mistakes become inevitable. Pride grows. Listening decreases. Wisdom for others. Decisions become driven by ego rather than truth. That is true not only for leaders but for all people. The moment we believe we are completely self-sufficient, we begin drifting away from humility. And without humility, genuine growth becomes difficult. The dream reminded me that healing often begins with listening. Listening to God. Listening to conscience. Listening to ordinary people. Listening to truths we would rather avoid. Only then can real transformation begin. As I reflected on the words spoken to me in that dream, 4 principles continued returning to my mind. Integrity over power, love over ambition, courage over silence, humility over pride. Those words may appear simple, yet they contain wisdom that can guide individuals, communities, and nations. Integrity reminds us that character matters more than influence. Love reminds us that people matter more than personal advancement. Courage reminds us that truth must never be abandoned because it is inconvenient. Humility reminds us that no human being stands above others. These lessons have remained with me ever since. They influence how I think about leadership. They influence how I think about responsibility. And they influence how I think about the future. After all, I understand that no power lasts forever unless it serves the people. Money, status, and fame cannot bring dignity to a nation if its citizens continue living with injustice, poverty, and division. The world today faces too many conflicts, too much inequality, and too much suffering. I pray for a better future for South Africa. I pray for a better future for Africa. I pray for the people of the United States. And I pray for all those across the world who long for peace, justice, and opportunity. Let us reject selfishness and endless greed. Let us stand against injustice, oppression, and every form of division that separates human beings from one another. Let us work together to build societies founded upon respect, unity, compassion, and responsibility toward future generations. No matter how difficult circumstances may become, do not lose faith in the future. Every nation possesses the ability to change its destiny when its people unite around what is right. I believe Africa will rise. I believe justice will prevail. I believe hope will remain with those who refuse to surrender their dreams of a better world. If this story has touched your heart in any way, I invite you to reflect on the lessons that have shaped my own journey. Ask yourself, what burdens you may be carrying that were never meant to be carried alone. Ask yourself where integrity, love, courage, and humility can play a greater role in your life. And if you also believe in a future built upon dignity, justice, and compassion, I encourage you to leave a word of encouragement and continue walking with us as we spread hope to more people around the world. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me to share the lesson that changed my life. A lesson that began with exhaustion, continued through a dream, and ultimately taught me that sometimes the strongest thing a leader can do is stop, listen, and trust God. Thank you for everything.